Hello, everyone, and welcome to your next episode of MHEDA Talks. I'm your host, Sherry Altergat, CEO of the CX Edge. Well, we have some very special guests today. You guys might see some familiar faces. We have Mike Vaughn. He's the Chief Financial Officer at Thompson & Johnson Equipment. And Jeremy Wall, for anybody who has gone through the MHEDA Masters Management Program in the past, you would be familiar with him as he's the co-founder and CEO at Goalmakers. Hello, guys. How are you?
Doing
Awesome.
great, Sherry. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, I was saying, Jeremy, we've been on a podcast a few years ago. And Mike, this is our first time together, which is wild because of how involved you are in MHEDA. And I know we've seen each other at various events through the years. So it's great to have both of you together. This is actually going to be a two-part series. This is the first part of two parts. We're here today to kind of talk about the Master Manager Program. I know, Jeremy, how many years have you been doing this with MHEDA? It's been a few now.
We're coming up on year 5 of the Master Manager Program. So very exciting. First was 2020 in fall, and to be back here in 2025 with continued excitement. A lot of companies sending new faces through every single year. It's been wonderful. So I appreciate you having us on to talk a little bit more about it today, and excited to have Mike joining us as our guest expert on the finance sections of the Master Manager Program this year.
And so 5 years, I mean, anymore, 5 years is impressive for any program to continue. There has to be a tremendous amount of interest. So our goal for today is kind of to talk through some elements of the program to get people more familiar. If they're kind of on the fence, they're not sure if it's something that makes sense for them. But I want to kick it off, Mike. Like I said, I know people know you from MHEDA and being at various events, but maybe for some people newer to the industry that aren't as familiar with yourself, could you just give us a brief introduction of yourself, a little bit about Thompson & Johnson? And I always love to know how people got started in this industry.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Sherry. Yeah, I'll start with Thompson Johnson. The Thompson Johnson shares a lot of common anniversaries as MHEDA because we were founded in the same year as MHEDA. So MHEDA was celebrating its 70th anniversary last year, and so were we. So we started off as a Clark dealership based in Syracuse, and over the years we've grown to also add Toyota and Crown as our main product lines, serving pretty much the middle of New York State through to the western parts of Massachusetts, Vermont, northern Pennsylvania. We're really blessed to have a third generation within Thompson & Johnson. So a really fine individual, John Schneckenberger, is teamed up with his father, David Schneckenberger. David has over 40 years experience in the industry, so still going strong and still loving it. So we have 4 locations, 160 employees, 170 employees, half of which are technicians. We always try to get to that 50% level of technicians. So I've been in the industry for 24 years and 3 days. So my anniversary was August 5th I started August 5th of 2002. I was referred actually I worked for another dealership locally, and was the chief financial officer there for almost 20 years. I came to Thompson & Johnson almost 4 years ago, and very much a family-owned business and just very personal business. What I love about the industry is we sell steel, we sell equipment, but it's teamwork and people that make the engine hum. So as Sherry mentioned, I was fortunate enough to serve in the board of directors from 2013 to 2022, served as chairman in 2019. So was very active in MHEDA. And I also should add that Thompson & Johnson's been a MHEDA MVP for several years running now. So we take a lot of pride in earning that award every year that demonstrates our commitment to industry, our employees, our communities. So very important to us.
As it should be. I think sometimes people don't realize how hard it is to get the MHEDA MVP award. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. That's a long time to be in any industry, these days. So that's awesome to hear.
When you love it, you love it.
You have to love it. I actually started in 2001, so I might trump you by a year in terms of being in the industry, but it's gone by really, really fast. I like to say that I started when I was 15. Unfortunately, that wasn't true. Jeremy, if I could hop over to you, as I say, people might be familiar from our previous podcast together, or if they've been through the MHEDA Master Managers Program. But I was hoping you could give us maybe just, we're going to talk about the program today, but could you just give us maybe a high level overview of what that program looks like?
Yeah, so I will say first, if you want to learn more, go to goalmakers.com/MHEDA. All the program details are there, key dates, learning curriculum, takeaways, all sorts of things. So that's where if you want to go deeper, but 5,000 foot view, the Master Manager program is actually based on an executive MBA curriculum streamlined down into 10 weeks. It's a mix of self-paced learning, so at your own speed, fit it in when you can. Some people are going to sit down in one sitting and do 2 hours and knock it all out. Others, 20 minutes a day at lunch, work their way through it. But it's self paced learning to go through the online videos, text, exercises, downloads. And then that leads up to bi weekly Zoom calls, which we've got Jim Ripke, who will have another session in part 2 speaking with, and Mike Vaughn on our finance sessions joining us, along with your fellow MHEDA peers. So those are current, future leaders of some of the greatest companies in the country coming together to learn from each other, share more, and really grow on their business acumen. And so fundamentally, the program is a learning and networking program that focuses on really applicable tools. So I'll talk a little bit more about the finance curriculum today, but the first 6 weeks is people management, organizational leadership. And then the last 4 weeks is where we really dig into the numbers and help you understand how, regardless of your role, you can help contribute to a more profitable organization.
Thank you for that. That's a great overview. And I think, we can never stress enough the importance of education and especially industry specific education. Mike knows, and Jeremy, I'm sure you've learned that this industry, especially on the financial side, there's a lot of acronyms and different type of verbiage that, unless you're from this industry, you would have zero idea of what it means, even if you have an MBA from a university or whatever the case is. So I think even if you have that level of formal education, there's a lot of benefit to understanding it and learning from people like Mike and Jim, who we'll talk to in our next episode. So, Mike, I wanted to circle back to you, and I have to admit, my background is sales and marketing. Finance has never been in my wheelhouse. My husband is a CPA, and he will certainly attest to finance was never something that I was particularly interested in, nor wanted to be. But I will say, as I matured in my career and moved up in the organization, there was a real recognition that I had a gap in terms of understanding some of the financials and the budgeting elements of the company. So I wanted to hear from your perspective of why you believe it's essential for managers and not just executives, not just the C-suite, to really understand a company's financials.
Yeah, so I'll have to say, following what you just said, one of the things that I really love is working with our operational and departmental managers on financial goals and financial performance and things like that. And to answer your question, I think it's super important that the operational group and the department groups, they're the people that are in the trenches actually making decisions, driving transactions, driving customer service, driving performance, working with the branch employees. And it's super important for them to have an understanding of what the financial goals are so that they can be certain that the decisions and the actions that they're taking on a daily basis are consistent, will lead to being consistent with achieving the company goals. As we'll talk in a little bit later on, there are several different things. I think what's really important is, when we're operational managers, is to be able to, take those acronyms that you referenced earlier and understand what those individual operating metrics mean and how they impact the financial performance of their business. But ultimately, we have to make sure we're all rowing the boat in the same direction. Working hard is admirable, but working hard with a purpose and ensuring that our goals are consistent with each other, and we don't have any divergent goal lines that working in the same direction consistently is, and that's why it's important for them to understand the operations and how it impacts the performance, and working backwards from the financials as well.
Yeah, I got to say that I've sat through hundreds of probably town hall meetings that the companies that I've worked for have done and other companies have done. And there's always a good amount of time spent on the financials. And I've seen a lot of people leave those meetings almost confused and kind of glazed over when it comes to financial element. And that probably is one of the most important things that we're talking about. But I think when you don't understand something, it's very easy to kind of brush over it and, just kind of move past it very quickly. So having that understanding, I think helps the entire organization for sure. Jeremy, so if we look back at the program, if you had somebody like me who went into the program and said, look, I am not a finance person, I'm not really interested in finance, I would be starting from ground zero. Am I going to be lost when I start those financial concepts? Or how do you bring somebody up to speed that maybe doesn't have a background at all in accounting or finance?
It's a great question because oftentimes it's intimidating. And especially, I know that you just mentioned you're sitting in the town hall, you hear some acronyms thrown at you. We're talking about our DSO, our AR days, these kind of things. Like, wait, and it comes so fast that if you don't have the lexicon of finance, it's all Greek. So we start off by fundamentally, the first section of that is called demystifying the financials. I think fundamentally we like to use that term because often people, A, it's intimidating, but B, if you don't know the words, you don't understand the structure of how these numbers play together, it's all just sort of bunched together as the numbers. And so two parts that I like to say is one is we always use a case study. And the reason we use a case study is that if you just look at an Excel spreadsheet and you see a bunch of numbers and some graphs, it's often sort of not connected to what you do in the day to day. And so when we put it in the context of a case study, you can say, oh, well, when that decision is made, how does that affect this part of our financial statement? Well, what if we did it differently? How would that change that same part of the statement? And one of the best things in all the CFOs I know always sort of reference back this idea of the numbers tell a story. But if you don't understand the story and you're just trying to learn about finances, taking that back to your own business is really challenging. And so we don't just start throwing a bunch of terms at you, we use a case study. But the other part of that is we introduce the lexicon of finance. And so we break it down into the first piece being, let's just understand the three financial statements that every business has: an income statement, a balance sheet, and a statement of cash flows. Okay, what are the nuances of each of those statements? For a lot of people, and I'll be the first to address this, we actually asked this as one of our poll questions, they'll never see the balance sheet of their company. And so if you don't have access to that balance sheet, you think, oh, that doesn't matter to me. But what's our current level of accounts receivable? Where does all of the inventory sit when we talk about assets? That's on the balance sheet. But if you don't have insights into where that's represented because you're just looking at the income statement, sometimes that's where these disconnects start to happen. And so starting by just sort of the 101 level and then building on that, we get deeper into some specific financial ratios, and that's like gross margin or day sales outstanding, these things that, okay, now we're starting to say, how do we create a positive impact on those statements, which are all, and I point this out, they're all trailing indicators. They show us what's already happened. How do we improve those moving forward? That's your job as a manager. And to Mike's point earlier, we're driven by people, and people make the decisions that create that positive change. And so fundamentally, we want to start by making it simple, not overly intimidating. And then just to sprinkle on this, we'll talk about it a little bit more. One of the things we do is we introduce the DISC report. So distributor statistical comparison is one of my favorite things that MHEDA puts together. It's an incredible report that actually takes the previous year's data of all of the represented companies. So now we're adding a level into it of here's how you understand the finances, and here's what this looks like in our industry today. And it's a really nice way to start to connect that, even if you don't have insights into books at your own company.
Yeah, and I think that this report is a game changer for people to really understand how it's all interconnected and make it make sense for their business. So I love that. I think that's such an important point. I want to move on up.
What's super important, like you mentioned, what makes sense is I call it there's a translation that happens. A translation that happens between CFO talk and operational talk and vice versa. So, I've been guilty of it. I work hard not to try to speak in a language that our employees don't understand, but there is a way to be able to connect those dots so that everybody can speak that same language on the same topic, both coming from different experiences and different levels of detail and knowledge, but yet everybody, we're just all on the same page, talking the same words. There's nothing lost in translation. And I think that contributes heavily to not having a deer in the headlights kind of result when you're talking to somebody that's new, trying to learn the system or trying to be more improve their financial acumen.
Yeah, and I think I can give, I mean, we're kind of talking about people that maybe don't have any finance background, but the reality is there's a lot of people who would take this program that do have a finance background, that might be the controller for their company or might be an accounting manager. For those people, I think it's going to help them better understand how to tell that story, as Jeremy said, to people who don't have that financial background. So it really is a give and take between the two, no matter what your level of expertise is, for sure. Um, I want to just kind of, we don't have too much time. So I want to get more of a real world perspective. Mike, I know you've known people who've gone through the program. Jeremy, you've trained tons of people now after doing this for 5 years. Do you have any real world examples of someone after completing the program, how it really enhanced their decision making ability as it relates to the company?
I'll kick that one off just as the person who's been facilitating it. I think one of the things I always say is if you know anyone who's gone through the program, talk to them. We've got over 100 alumni of this program from across all different MHEDA companies. A couple of them, we've got testimonials on the page. And whether those are directors of sales who say, hey, I always knew how to serve the right customer, but were we doing that profitably? How can I rethink about how we're serving the right customers in a profitable way by setting goals, keeping my team accountable to that, and then helping all people understand that you can focus on top line. I think that's one of the biggest takeaways for a lot of people is they focus on the top line all the time. Are we growing? Are we growing sales? But everyone in the organization, warehouse managers, operational people, everyone else contributes to bottom line success. And so that's one of the big things we try and help people understand is regardless of your role, through better decision making, understanding variable costs, being more efficient with your time and resources, you can contribute to a more profitable organization, even if you're not on the biz dev side, just growing the top line. One of my favorite stories comes back to it was actually a C-suite executive who went through the program. And I'm not ever going to name names, but a lot of C-suite executives, they're great at people. They're great at strategy. They're great at all the things that make a great business, but they just rely on Mike and their C-suite on the finance side to figure out the financial pieces. And they, to your point, it might be experienced financial professionals. There's a lot of people who are experienced in business who have very little financial acumen. And so if you're one of those, don't be intimidated. Come check out the Master Manager program. But a C-suite exec came in and said, one of the things that we just let get away from us because we didn't think it mattered was our days sales outstanding. We weren't really managing our accounts receivable that well. And so after going through the program, they really did a calculation that we're sitting at 63 days on average in our receivable days. How can we really set a target for a year out to get that to 45 and then 2 years out to aim for 35? And when they started to think about how does that re-inject cash back into the business that you can use, you can spend, you can do things with, as opposed to allowing your customers to just use you as a bank, that was a really sort of game changer that he unlocked so many potentials. But that was just one of the takeaways that he pulled in. But he could then, to Mike's point, go from CFO speak to how do I articulate this in a way that people understand in a really tangible way. So that's just one of my favorite examples because they were able to half their DSO just by focusing on one KPI that mattered for them that they took out of the program.
Yeah.
Yeah, in our circumstance, we've had both financial and non-financial people go through the Master Manager program. And I think that, one of the things easily to get trapped in is get trapped in your own little world and be focused only on things that impact you directly. And I think the Master Manager the feedback that I got from the Master Manager program was that it really kind of opened people's eyes. I mean, you think on the outside, it seems like our business is very simple, but it's actually very complex. There's a lot of moving pieces and parts. Teamwork is tremendously important, and I just think the word was our eyes are open. They really broaden their perspective in terms of how all the different ways that we work together and how each department, the important things that they have to consider. So it really, when you consider master program, I think it really accomplished the goal because it covered so many different elements of the operation that really gave them a fresher perspective and, more respect for other areas that they really haven't worked in because they have a better understanding now.
Yeah. Yeah, I can tell you, when I had mentioned that clearly finance is not my background. When I was early on in my career, we had a new president come into the company, and he had an accounting background, and he was who I was going to reporting to. Previously, I had reported to somebody that was really a sales and marketing focused individual. So we got along great. We understood each other's language. And then I'm kind of left with now this person that really has a very strong accounting background. Everything he does is numbers focused. And as being a young marketing sales professional, I was super intimidated by how am I even going to, I didn't even understand half of the things that he said. And it was kind of my first experience of being really challenged from a marketing perspective to show evidence and long-term growth of what we're doing in strategies and how that equates to really to the top line of the company. And I work with a lot of people in marketing specifically that have that same problem of justifying marketing strategies and being able to justify them to a CFO or CEO because um, they don't have the information of how to communicate that appropriately. So, have you seen how having a better financial acumen can really boost confidence and credibility for people who might be in lower level positions and boost their credibility with higher level C suite positions if they can speak in those more financial terms?
Oh, absolutely. I think with understanding, I think it's a more qualitative discussion that you have with those senior executives in terms of demonstrating that you are in touch with how the performance is handling in your department or your branch operation, and making the connection to the performance as well, and then taking that to the next step and saying and identifying the areas of risk, identifying the areas where we could be performing better, those that we're excelling at, and why we're excelling in those ways, and really understanding the why behind the results. And that's
Mhm.
always a great conversation to have with an executive. You're demonstrating just that you really have your fingers on the pulse of what's making the operation hum.
And
Mhm.
and just to build on that, Mike, one of the things we talk about all the time is for people who don't have much financial background, they're pretty intimidated by you. And maybe you have a great culture in your organization, so it might not feel that. So if you're someone else and you say, I can't speak to the CFO, they speak a foreign language from me. The goal of going through this portion of the financial sort of fundamental section is how do I ask better questions? How do I say, Mike, I'd love to sit down and see how I can contribute to building a better, more profitable branch, department, or as an individual, just what are the KPIs that I can help on? Here's what I've learned coming into this. Here's what I saw from the benchmark report, from the statistical comparison. I'd love to have a better conversation with you. And I think fundamentally, that's one of the things when you mentioned there, Sherry, confidence. When you have the understanding of the fundamentals, your confidence grows because it's not necessarily like a mystery. And you can go and say, hey, Mike, I know what I don't know now. Can we talk a little bit more? And I'd love for you to help guide me. And that is, as we talk about what you said there, Sherry, how does that help with credibility with your upper management? That is the fastest way to do it, is asking questions, leading with curiosity, but also understanding that you can be you can accept the things you don't know, and if you're open to asking the right questions, now you're going to move the needle in the right way. And so that's just one of the things we talk about demystifying. You're going to have a little bit more confidence just to come and ask better questions.
Hey, Jeremy, if you have a CFO that wears crazy ugly shirts, we're a lot less intimidating. So,
I was, I was going to say I didn't get the memo today. I felt underdressed or professional.
Well, thank you both for sharing that with me. Now, Jeremy, I know we've said you've been with me before. Mike, this is your first time on the podcast. We do a little something at the end we like to call the lightning round. And I'd like to first congratulate both of you. You made it to the lightning round. So, congratulations. I have 5 questions I'm going to ask you just so we can get to know you guys a little bit better and make this a little bit more fun. Jeremy, I'm going to start with you because you've already been through this, so I think that's the most fair. I'm going to start with Jeremy, and then Mike, you're going to do the same question, and then Mike, I'll start with you and go to Jeremy. Um, Jeremy, what's the one business term that you secretly hate hearing?
Ooh. Um, Empowerment. And I know that that sounds counterintuitive. It's one of the sections we talk about. People say, oh, we need to empower our team, but they don't do anything about it. And I feel like it's often used as lip service without follow through. So it's one of my favorite concepts when used right. But when it's sort of talked as just like a veneer for actually doing something, I don't like it if it's not actually built on. So a little bit contrarian answer there.
No, I like it. It's good. Mike, how about you?
I think the one thing that makes the hair stand up in the back of my neck is when people say that's the way we've always done it.
That's a good one too. I would agree. All right, Mike, what is the weirdest thing that you believed in as a kid? Or maybe even today, but as a kid.
Um, hmm. Well, I grew up in Buffalo, so maybe believing that the Bills are going to win the Super Bowl someday.
There's
Jeremy,
always
how
next year, Mike.
about what's the weirdest thing you believed in as a kid, Jeremy?
That's a tough question. I think it was that I had any real chance at playing professional sports. I think as a kid, you're like, oh, I could do it. I'm just going to visualize it. But I
Yeah.
loved playing sports. But when you think about even just the Bills, like I couldn't even make the Bills these days.
All right, Jeremy, would you rather time travel to the past or to the future?
At this point, future, I think past is always super interesting. I can read about it a little bit more, but especially with what we're going through right now with technological change, who knows where we'll be. So future sounds more interesting.
Mike, how about you? Would you go to the past or the future?
Jeremy, we're going in opposite directions. I've always been a history fan, so I want to go back into points in history and experience it.
And then you can prove that we have always done it that way.
Exactly.
All right, Mike, if aliens beamed you up and asked for one Earth snack, what would you be giving them?
Chicken wings
It's a good one.
with blue cheese, no ranch.
Well, yeah, you have to do blue cheese. I agree.
Yeah.
Jeremy, how about you? What's the Earth snack that aliens should enjoy?
So I live in North Carolina. My family is deep roots in agriculture. My son just started tasting real foods, and the first thing that we got him was a perfectly ripe, in-season watermelon. I don't think
Mm.
it's very much in the world that I like more than that. And so, intergalactic, you're going to taste some got to be North Carolina watermelon.
That's great. We got a meat and a fruit. That would be perfect. Um, all right, Jeremy, last one. Finish this sentence. The best managers always blank.
All back here, empower their teams. And I think that comes back to this a lot of lip service, but the best managers empower their teams. They don't micromanage. One of my favorite quotes is a Steve Jobs quote. We don't hire smart people to tell them what to do. We hire smart people to tell us what to do. And so if you
Yeah.
create a system where that's encouraged and a culture where that's enabled, I think the best managers empower their team. They don't just try and do everything themselves.
Mike, how about you? The best managers always blank.
Take time to understand their employees, the people that work with, their teammates. Understand who they are, where they came from. Just take a personal interest in them as individuals. Um, I think that employees really appreciate that, and don't feel like a number, and feel like, hey, this person, individual, is demonstrating that they really do care about me.
Well, thank you. But those are great answers. You both successfully made it through the lightning round, so thank you for that. We spent a lot of time today talking about the Master Manager program. It is an online program. You can find out more information through MHEDA's website, MHEDA.org. That's where you can register. That's where you can sign up. There's a link, Jeremy, I believe, to Goal Makers, where you can get more information on that program itself. It starts August 26th, though, so you don't have a lot of time. You have to get on this. You have to get the approval from your CFO and get signed up. So thank you guys so much for spending some time with me today. Unfortunately, that's the end of our podcast. Is there any parting words that you would like to leave our listeners with?
Super happy we're doing this, Sherry. I completely enjoyed the last 30 minutes together, and Jeremy, I'm really looking forward to diving in and making those presentations in October.
Mike, I'm delighted to have you joining us this year. And with that, Sherry, my only last plug is organizational alignment is one of the best things you can do. So if you can sign up one person from your team, awesome. We offer discounts for teams that register 3 or more people. So great way to save, but also grow together. That's my last plug. Teams join together, come in. If you've got a big team, email me. We can figure out something to make a special offer as well. But Jeremy@goalmakers.com. You can always book a time with us on goalmakers.com/MHEDA, where all the details are. Sherry, thank you so much for having us.
Thank you guys so much. We'll see you next time.